Tonight, on the Midnight Drive, we're stopping in Tonopah, Nevada, at one of the strangest roadside locations in the United States, the Clown Motel. A glowing motel sitting beside an old cemetery in the middle of the Nevada desert. And somehow, that combination feels so wrong immediately. Doesn't it? Not because of ghosts, not because of paranormal evidence, but because some places create emotional tension just by existing. Tonight, we're exploring why empty hotels, clown faces, desert silence, and forgotten highways create such a powerful sense of unease. Why places designed to comfort travelers can sometimes feel deeply unsettling instead. And why the Clown Hotel might be less about hauntings and more about the strange psychology of liminal spaces. See, there are certain places that feel unsettling immediately. Not after something happens. Not after hearing a ghost story. The feeling arrives first. And the Clown Motel in Tonopah, Nevada is one of those places. At a glance, it almost sounds fake. A clown-themed motel sitting beside an old cemetery in the middle of the Nevada desert. It sounds less like a real location and more like something invented by a horror movie writer trying too hard. Right? But it does exist. And what makes this place interesting isn't whether it's haunted. It's why so many people feel emotionally uncomfortable before anything paranormal even starts entering the conversation. Because the Clown Motel accidentally combines several things the human brain already struggles with psychologically. Isolation, artificial cheerfulness, death imagery, silence, temporary spaces. And the farther you look at it, the more the place starts resembling something larger than a roadside attraction. It starts feeling liminal. And liminal spaces are fascinating because they exist in between things. Not fully one thing, not fully another thing. A motel is already a liminal environment by nature. Nobody truly belongs there. People arrive briefly, sleep for the night, and then they leave. The rooms are intentionally temporary, designed to feel familiar enough to comfort strangers, while remaining emotionally detached from permanence. That creates a strange psychological atmosphere automatically, especially late at night, especially when the parking lot is mostly empty, especially when the hallways go quiet. Most people have experienced some version of this feeling. Walking through a nearly empty hotel corridor, hearing an ice machine humming somewhere in the distance, a flickering vending machine glowing in the dark, muted television sounds behind closed doors, carpet patterns that feel outdated but impossible to place in time. There's a strange emotional neutrality to those spaces, like they exist outside ordinary life, temporarily. That's why liminal environments affect people so strongly. They feel familiar, but disconnected from normal emotional context. The Clown Motel amplifies that feeling dramatically because it layers clown imagery into the environment, and clowns already create psychological tension for many people. Not because everybody's afraid of clowns specifically, but because clown faces distort normal human expressions. Exaggerated smiles, exaggerated eyes, painted emotions frozen permanently onto a face. The brain recognizes them as human, while simultaneously recognizing that something feels incorrect. That's the tension we're talking about, because humans rely so heavily on facial expressions to determine emotional safety. We're constantly reading eyes, movement, microexpressions, subtle emotional cues. Clown makeup disrupts all of them. The expression becomes fixed, artificial, emotionally unreadable. And once clown imagery is removed from its intended environment, circuses, birthday parties, performances, the emotional meaning starts changing. A clown face in daylight surrounded by noise and activity feels different than a clown face staring silently from a motel wall at 1:30 a.m. Doesn't it? 2:30 a.m. 3:30 a.m. Context changes emotional interpretation completely. That's part of why abandoned amusement parks feel so unsettling too. It's not because joy itself is frightening, but because joy disconnected from activity becomes very eerie very quickly. Performance without performers. Cheerfulness without people. That emotional contradiction creates immense amounts of discomfort. The Clown Motel sits directly beside another emotionally charged environment, the Old Tonopah Cemetery, which means the motel combines two completely conflicting emotional signals at the same time: playfulness and immortality. How fun, right? Bright clown imagery beside literal graves. Artificial smiles beside physical reminders of death. And the human brain reacts strongly to conflicting emotional information like that, especially in isolated environments. Tonopah itself intensifies that feeling because the town feels suspended between eras. Once a booming mining town, now quiet, remote, surrounded by enormous desert silence. At night especially, Tonopah starts feeling disconnected from ordinary geography. The roads empty out. The darkness surrounds the town, and it becomes overwhelming. And beyond the motel itself, there's almost nothing. Just desert. That's important to all of this. That psychological component of desert emptiness. In cities, the brain constantly processes stimulation, traffic, noise, movement, people. But in isolated environments, small things become amplified. A sound carries farther. A light feels brighter. A building feels more emotionally significant simply because there's nothing else around it. That's why Roadside Americana becomes so emotionally strange in remote areas. Old diners, vacancy signs, gas stations glowing beside empty highways, motels waiting for travelers who may or may not arrive, places built around movement, existing inside stillness. And Nevada is filled with environments like that. Places designed for activity, now sitting quietly in enormous empty space. That's what gives parts of Nevada such a strong liminal feeling. The sensation that places were built for one emotional purpose, but now exist inside another entirely. And honestly, the Clown Motel may be one of the clearest examples of that in America. Because underneath all the paranormal marketing, the place feels emotionally dislocated. Hard stop. That's it. What do you think? Would you spend the night at the Clown Hotel in Tonopah, Nevada? Let us know in the comments below, wherever you might be listening. We love having you along on the Midnight Drive. So what makes places feel haunted? That question is a lot more complicated than it sounds, because sometimes people aren't reacting to paranormal activity at all. They're reacting to emotional layering inside an environment. And the Clown Motel is almost entirely built from emotional layers that conflict with one another. That conflict creates tension, and tension creates interpretation. Because humans are constantly trying to emotionally read the spaces around them. We instinctively ask, is this place safe? Is this place active? Is this place abandoned? Is this place familiar? Is this place okay? Is something wrong here? Usually, the environment answers clearly. A busy restaurant feels socially alive. A quiet library feels calm. A hospital feels clinical. But some places send mixed emotional signals simultaneously. And when that happens, our brains struggle to categorize the environment properly. That's where unease begins. The Clown Motel does this immediately. Let's break it down. The clown imagery communicates joy, entertainment, playfulness, nostalgia. But the cemetery beside the property communicates death, history, grief, permanence. In the desert surrounding both of those things communicates emptiness, exposure, and isolation. Those emotional signals do not naturally belong together. And because they conflict, the environment starts feeling psychologically unstable. Not dangerous necessarily, just emotionally unresolved. That unresolved feeling becomes even stronger late at night, especially in roadside environments. Because nighttime just changes how humans interpret space. Details disappear. Distance becomes difficult to judge. Silence somehow becomes louder. And isolated buildings start feeling detached from the normal world around them. And that's why roadside motels often feel strangely liminal after midnight. They exist outside routine. People arrive anonymously. They leave anonymously. Rooms temporarily become tiny, private worlds, then reset for the next stranger. Nothing fully accumulates there emotionally. But traces linger. And people are extremely sensitive to traces. A stain on old carpet, faded wallpaper, buzzing lights, an outdated lobby, the smell of old air conditioning. Those details signal time passing. And once environments begin visibly carrying time, well, people start projecting stories onto them automatically. That's why old motels often feel heavier emotionally than modern hotels. Modern hotels just feel interchangeable, predictable. But older roadside motels still carry fragments of personality, fragments from another era. And the Clown Motel specifically feels deeply tied to another era of America. Roadside tourism, desert highways, independent motels glowing beside long stretches of empty road. A version of travel built around movement and novelty. But now, that culture itself feels partially abandoned, which creates another layer of liminality. The motel still operates. People still stay there. But culturally, it feels detached from the modern world. Like a surviving fragment from an older version of Roadside America. that emotional disconnect matters more than people realize, because liminal spaces often emerge when environments outlive their original emotional context. A shopping mall with no shoppers, an empty airport terminal, a playground at night, a motel hallway after midnight. Places designed for activity, temporarily emptied of the activity that they were built for. The Clown Motel exists inside that exact emotional territory. And honestly, the clown imagery itself almost becomes secondary for a while, because what people are really reacting to is contradiction. The sensation that the environment isn't emotionally coherent. Cheerful imagery surrounded by death. Artificial smiles surrounded by silence. Temporary lodging beside permanent burial. Bright lights surrounded by endless darkness. That contradiction creates emotional static. And our brains naturally try to resolve emotional static through narrative. That's where ghost stories often begin. Not necessarily from deception or hallucination, but from people trying to explain environments that feel emotionally difficult to organize. And Nevada, as a state, amplifies this process perfectly, because Nevada itself constantly swings between emotional extremes. The brightest city on earth, surrounded by an enormous empty desert. Tourist spectacle, surrounded by abandoned mining towns. Artificiality, surrounded by raw isolation. The Clown Motel almost feels like a condensed version of the entire state. Everything emotionally strange about Nevada compressed into one property. And maybe that's why the motel became famous in the first place. Not because it's the most haunted place in America, not by any stretch, but because it captures a very specific psychological feeling people struggle to describe. The feeling that a place has drifted slightly outside normal emotional reality. Not fully abandoned, not fully active, not fully comforting, but not fully threatening, just wrong. In the quietest possible way. And honestly, that feeling may be more powerful than traditional horror, because loud horror eventually exhausts itself. The jump scares fade, the shock fades, but subtle emotional unease lingers, especially when people can't fully explain why they felt it in the first place. That's what makes liminal environments so effective psychologically. They create unresolved emotional tension without clear resolution. And the Clown Motel may be one of the clearest examples of that phenomenon in modern Americana. Not because of what supposedly hides there, but because the place itself feels suspended between emotional categories. A roadside motel, a tourist attraction, a relic, a performance, a graveyard, a memory, all sitting quietly together beneath neon lights in the Nevada desert. Some places disturb people simply by existing in emotional combinations that the human brain never fully learns how to settle into.